Hi everyone. I wanted to record a video clarifying some key points in the readings to assist you guys. And so I'm going to work through ideas in a few of the chapters that you read for this unit. The book talks about writing letters on company letterhead, and I just wanted to say a few words about letterhead. Some of you might be familiar with this, but in pretty much any organization you work for, they're going to have standard documents. They're going to have a letterhead for the company, which they can usually give you as either on a PDF or a JPEG file. And they'll also have other standard formatting documents. For example, many companies rely on what's called Associated Press or AP style. So when I worked as a writer for the Office of Admissions at UW-Madison, we used AP. And just to give you a real world example of how this is important, a former student, someone who just graduated from the master's here, and I was her master's project advisor, she started working in a company as a workplace writer. And she wrote to me and she said, my company doesn't have standards yet for how they want, for which citation style they want to use. So what should I use? Should I use AP? And I said, well, if nothing's established, that is a pretty standard guideline to use. So back to letterhead, why is letterhead important? Well, it relates to ethos and credibility. It proves that you work for that organization. You cannot use it if you don't work somewhere. So when I sent out applications as a graduate student, I used UW-Madison letterhead. When I send out letters of recommendation for students now, I use Kansas State University letterhead. Actually, there's one particular to the English department. So you always need to know from your company what documents are standard, what kind of editing style or reference they're using, and then also if they have letterhead for you to use. I want to talk a little bit about the practice of CCing or BCCing on communications, because the book talks about it just a little bit, and I'm kind of surprised. I love this textbook, but the author goes into a long digression about professional ethics, but doesn't get to the ethics of the BCC. I cannot stress enough how frequently this issue comes up in my day-to-day life, both as an assistant professor, but also as a writing center director. You guys probably know what I mean when I say chain of command. It's a term that often refers to military operations, but in any organization that you work for, there is a chain of command. You are subordinate to your boss, and sometimes many bosses, and that boss is subordinate to somebody else. And when you think about CCing and BCCing, that chain of command comes into play all the time. I'll give you an example. So it's important to me as a writing center director that my 25 employees see me as the boss, as someone they can respect, as someone who's making the key decisions. As a result, I don't always CC my boss, the department head of English, in my communications. But I do when I want them to know that I'm CCing her. So recently we had an event happen in the Writing Center that resulted in a Title IX complaint around gender in the workplace. And I wanted this employee to know, and I wanted her to know that I was CCing in my boss, and I wanted my boss to be in on that communication. And so I CC'd her on all the communications. I also CC'd another university official who works with Title IX complaints. Now, in my individual emails with the student over what happened to her, I did not CC my boss and I did not CC the other university official because it wouldn't have been appropriate. I also didn't BCC them because there are certain communications where someone expects that those communications are private and are just between you and that person. What I want to really impress is the idea that whenever you BCC someone, this is an ethical decision that you need to consider. Because yes, the author of the textbook is right that any email that we write, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in a second, any email we write, we should expect to be a public document. If you're sending an email, you should expect that that email can land on the president of your company's desk. That's what I assume every time I write an email at the university. I assume my department head might see it. I assume it might land on the president of the university's desk. So but despite that, there are still ethics involved with who gets to see whose email. So when my department head emails me something and I'm replying to her, I do not blind carbon copy someone into that conversation. And I apologize, they are now mowing, of course, while I'm making this video, so you might hear some background noise. When I do use BCC, I think about it very carefully. Is the need greater than the demand for privacy? And there are many times where I do BCC my department head in communications with students, for example, or when there's a contentious or challenging exchange going on, and I want her in on the conversation. So I weigh the person's expectation for privacy against my need for another person to be in on this conversation. But you don't take this lightly. I don't take it lightly anytime that I am using the BCC, but sometimes it's also about my maintaining autonomy or with my employees, or letting them know that I'm making decisions, and so I don't want to CC her in every communication. But when someone emails you from another office and you think that there's an expectation of privacy, again, you want to think carefully about the BCC. I'll say something else about this. If something that bothers me when other people do it, and so I try not to do this, if you write to me and you expect it to be private, when I respond to you, I don't just CC people into the conversation, because then they can see your whole email thread. So you have to think carefully about the CC as well, and what conversation you are giving people access to when you are doing that. As promised, I do want to say more about the idea that your email can land on anyone's desk at any time. My tutors write records of all of the sessions they hold in the Writing Center, and we ask each student, do you want us to email your professor also to let them know you came? But what I tell my tutors is, you have to assume that this note you take on the session could land on the president's desk. So you have to be very careful in what you write. Keep it short, keep it concise, to the point. Care about typos. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by the mowing. You should care about typos. You should care about proofreading, and in the language that you choose, because as the minute you record and send this note to the student, this note could end up on their professor's desk, on the university president's desk. Something that you may not know is that if you work for a public institution like I work for K-State, all of my emails are ultimately public domain, meaning that in any kind of legal proceeding, they can be requested and I could be subpoenaed. So I do not send any personal emails on my work email address. I have a private Gmail address for that. I cannot iterate enough that if you're working, whether you're working for a public institution or a corporation, you should never be sending personal emails. Just don't do it, because in a public institution, they could be subpoenaed. Even in a private institution, they can, and your bosses can look at them in a private institution because there are fewer regulations. So if your work suspects that you're doing other things on the job, they can look at your internet use and history, your browsing history. They can look at your personal communications at work. So I would be very careful about ever sending anything personal at work. Okay, I'm just checking my notes to see what else I want to communicate. The book talks about making subject lines informative, and you may be thinking, why do I have to care about that? Well, when you're making subject lines informative, what you're doing is making the life easier of the person who you're sending that communication to, because I may get 50 emails in a day and I need to know, this is one I need to address right now, and here's what the person's asking of me, and this is one that I can wait a week to address. So if someone says to me, quick response needed on X issue, then I immediately know what that email is and I can respond. So if you want my attention quickly and you write a subject line that says meeting today, ? Then I know, okay, I got to read this more quickly. Just like we said, one main idea per paragraph, when you are writing an email, you really should have one main idea per thread. Once you start emailing about another topic, start a new thread. And I'll give you an example. I recently had to order a bunch of objects for the Writing Center. It's too hard for the secretaries to go back and sift through all my emails to see the one in which I talked about toilet paper and the one in which I talked about ordering a microwave. I send one email for the microwave. I send another email for the toilet paper. I send another one for the markers, another one for the whiteboard. This way, when they're searching in their email, they can quickly pull up the email that related to that one thing. So that's been required. I learned that at one of my first writing jobs, and that's been consistent ever since. When you move on to a new thread, start a new email chain. Another example, I'm working on a book with a co-author, and she kept sending me messages on this one thread, and there's like 50 messages in there. It is impossible for me to find what I need, even searching in Google. So I asked her yesterday, can you please start a new email thread, because I'm really having trouble sifting through these emails and finding what I need. Okay, I think I'm going to stop there because this video is 10 minutes, but I hope that this clarifies some important issues, and I look forward to seeing what you're going to write in the comments.